Welcome to Booth Bastards. We're recording on a special Thursday night episode here. Basically, we had to juggle some schedules around, and we're trying to squeeze as many episodes as we can before we cut out for Emerald City at the end of the month. So this week, we've got a special interview episode. We'll be talking with our friend Denis Caron about his art, his company Corvink, his webcomics, and his Kickstarter with his new Elementals. So let's jump right in. First off, Daniel.
Hello. Back. Yes, thank you very much. And yeah, I've known Denis for a number of years, so it's excited to have you here tonight, Denis Caron. And but first, let me co-introduce Jason T. Rodgers of Fezzarama. So thank you for having us, Jason. Yeah. And so Denis, yes, now you introduce yourself more or say something.
Basically, we had to juggle some schedules around, and we're trying to squeeze the episode. Do we have a delay over there?
Somewhere.
Whoa.
Yeah, turn off the YouTube there, Dennis.
Oh, is that what's happening?
Yeah, I think you're watching the looped broadcast.
I was so confused. I was like, why am I hearing you twice?
It was like we're being under attack.
So you guys could hear that. That's good. I'm glad that
yes.
No, that was just you. Just in your head.
Oh,
I could hear the echo from his mic.
I could hear it bouncing through.
His backwards masking.
I was so confused. All right, cool. Hello.
So what show? It was in the last year or two where we met.
WonderCon.
Yeah, WonderCon. Yeah, WonderCon is where we usually run into each other.
Yeah, and I met Daniel as far back as 2008 or not 9, I think. He's one of the first people I met doing this, actually. Him and the Hicks from Little Vampires.
Yeah, I think it would be 2008 probably. Yeah, goes back a long ways.
I think that sounds about right because I remember looking at it, talking about coming up on Emerald City. This is going to be my 6th Emerald City. And I did the ape right before that, and that was my, I think it was the same for you too, right? Wasn't that like your annual show, or like how you could tell what year marker you're at? Was it ape or was it Emerald City?
It was WonderCon was my first show 9 years ago. 9 years ago?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I feel like we've been doing this for so long, yet sometimes when I think about it, it's like, wow, it doesn't feel that long too, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. It's crazy. So so you've been doing shows then for what?
6 years. This will be my 6th year, yeah. Emerald City now is my marker, so this will be my 6th year coming the end of this month.
So what's like the worst mistake you ever made at a show?
Worst mistake at a show? Well, going alone and doing a big exhibit is a huge mistake. Like Salt Lake City, doing that big 13-foot display or whatever. Yeah, that was not a good idea.
What happened with that?
Well, I had to borrow a couple buddies from around. Luckily, since we've been doing this so long, we all have friends and all that. But trying to set up a 13-foot display by yourself is one of the toughest things because you have to do it in scales. You put up one part, you put it across, and then you really need 3 people to bring it up. And I was attempting to do it by myself, and the whole thing like started toppling on me once, and I'm like, no, not gonna do that again. But that might not actually be my worst. Now that I said the toppling thing, San Diego Comic-Con, one of my first times there in Small Press. I used to use those metal grates that you'd clip together, and we were clipping it up, and me and Ali were trying to see how tall we could get it. And we thought we were good, and then one of us bumped into it, and the entire tower of those metal things just towered down and just crumbled in front of the booth. And it was, back at that time, I was really unorganized, and I'd get there like 2 or 3 hours before the show, which is a huge mistake. And I was like nervous trying to get it up. It topples down, and then I had to go through the first day with most of that not set up. I was setting it up while people were coming up, and I probably lost sales and all that kind of stuff because you're focusing on your booth rather than the people coming up to you.
Yeah, that's painful when things go bad like that, and you have to like deal with the stress of it and try to set it all up, and then deal with it not being set up during the show. That's rough.
Right, because then that's all you're focusing on too. Like you're not even thinking about the con anymore. You're thinking about the thing you should have been doing prior to getting there, and it's just like a cluster in your brain, like a this that, and you're just want to have an you want to have an aneurysm so that you stop functioning.
Just as a means of escape.
Yeah, exactly. That's usually what aneurysms are good for.
So you started out originally. Was the webcomic first for you? Is that what led you into doing the small press?
It wasn't L.A.W.L.S, which is kind of my flagship in the comic thing. My first comic was called Reader Rabbit, and that's what kind of started it all for me. That was back in college, 2007 or 8 or something like that. And then I went to my first con, and I was really inspired by like artists like Jeff Jacks and I'm trying to think of a couple others that were big for me. But at that time, I was like, I want to be a webcomic artist. I want to do this. And so I entered the con scene wanting to just mimic what other webcomic artists were doing. And that was, 2009.
And how long did you run that strip for?
Reader Rabbit, I think at that point, it was like a year and a half, but it only had like 60 strips. Because at that point, I wasn't diligent. I didn't have a schedule. I was just kind of posting whenever I felt like it. I was trying to work on it, and I was still learning how to, art in general. So that really was making it hard to do a schedule. But then I started the comic, or L.A.W.L.S specifically, I think, around my first year in the cons. I think it was around 2009. So I entered with that at the cons. But you know what? Now it seems like it's all a big mix for me, so I'm not going to say that is a historical fact. It's just my assumption of the history.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Now, and then since L.A.W.L.S, you've created Corvink, which is kind of like your umbrella.
Right. It's now the brand company for all my art, which that just came out of almost necessity. As much as I love doing the comic thing, I started creating art prints and T-shirts, and then I would come up with something that had nothing to do with the comic, and I'm like, well, where does this belong? And in my brain, I just couldn't place it anymore, and I would make it anyway. But then, I'd be doing my elevator pitch kind of thing about the comic, and then they're like, oh, well, how does this fit in? I'm like, it doesn't. So it just made more sense to kind of make the kind of branded company around it, and L.A.W.L.S just be a thing that is part of it instead of the other way around. Which that's why now at cons you'll never see L.A.W.L.S on the except for Emerald City. They're awesome and they'll let me do both. But every other con it just says Corvink now.
Interesting.
And so right now you've got a Elementals Kickstarter going on. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, they're called currently Corvink Elements. They're basically the 4 basic elements: earth, wind, fire, and water. And on Kickstarter, I did it just for fire, which is this guy right here. He basically was the beginning point. He was a project that I did in between my first comic and L.A.W.L.S. I did something called Unconscious Ink, where I would just doodle to get better, and I would let people suggest things to me. And I think this one was just one I came up with myself, where I was like, I want to just draw a grumpy fire. And so he's been around since, I think, 2009. And then he went on art prints as I started exploring art prints and buttons and all of that. And I've always liked him, and he became like an unofficial mascot for my art. Not necessarily Corvink, but just the attitude in my art, Mm-hmm. And then in the last year, I was trying to develop the idea for like a plush thing, and so I was definitely going to do him. But it dawned on me, one of my brand image things is like kind of gothic, occult, secret, magic, that kind of stuff. So I was like, well, why don't I do the other elements? And that's how I came up with, the water guy, air, and earth as well, which I don't know if you can see their full bodies, but so they're on Kickstarter right now. And in the first 3 days, Fire got funded, and then we were going for water, and he got unlocked about a week ago. So now we're shooting to get these 2 funded, and I need 6,000 to make him and 8,000 to make him.
Cool.
So,
and you've got 2 more weeks left to your campaign there.
Yeah, we're at day 14 today, so basically 13 days up to today.
And this is your second Kickstarter.
Yeah. My first Kickstarter was for L.A.W.L.S, so I have a volume 1 for L.A.W.L.S out, and that was funded. That was scary. Doing Kickstarters are just in general scary. I mean, as much as you have people interested in you never know if they're gonna be interested in helping you make a product. And so once that got funded, I did a 60-day campaign and it got funded near the end. So with this one, I had no idea because it's not part of L.A.W.L.S. It's not part of any kind of one of my bigger things that people know. But it was something I was passionate about. So I was like, you know what, let's just do it. Let's see. I mean, like Daniel's a big influence for me on that. You did the wall monsters. And just for me, it came out of left field. I didn't know you were even going to do something like that. You posted it up, and it did well. And I was like, if you're passionate about it and it fits your identity, people are going to like it. So let's see how much they like it, and it's worth the risk. It's better than not trying.
Yeah. So I know these Kickstarters are a ton of work. How long have you really been working on this? I mean, you have 4 prototypes. That takes time. So is this a year? Are we at a year-long process to get where you are now, or where
Actually,
you at?
a little over a year. I started, I think, around last January or February, because I wanted to make a toy, and I just didn't know what. And so I had prototyped Hatticus from L.A.W.L.S, which I had showed you, I think, at WonderCon or something. And I really liked it, but L.A.W.L.S has kind of unfortunately been on the back burner as I've been building Corvink up and everything. And it's not that I don't love the comic, it's just, you know how that is with the comic. Everything else, you've created a business now, and your focuses are all over the place. So I didn't think it was a wise first choice. I still have plans to make him, but after making him, I was really impressed by the company, and I felt inspired to make something else. So around, I think, March or so, maybe May at the most, I prototyped Fire, and had no other intents beyond making him at first, until I think Comic-Con, a friend of mine and I were talking, and we kind of brainstormed, and the whole idea came to a full concept. And so from, I think, July of last year, I was prototyping with this company, and it took that entire time. I literally, up until the week before the Kickstarter, I was still kind of in the last minute tweaking and everything. I don't even have the final prototype for these two. They've showed me pictures of where they're at, but I don't have them here. But these definitely are the final versions, 100%. But yeah, I mean, we're still working to get everything ready, and they're actually, this one and this one are in production right now, so in full-scale production since they're funded.
Awesome.
Which is great. So yeah, it's been a crazy year of my life. It's been weird because I'm usually very public about what I'm doing, and because being in the webcomic part of the industry, you post 3 times a week, you get it up there, you're telling people what you're doing, you're constantly engaging with people so they know what's up, they're excited. I went silent for, I think, 5 months or so, because there was nothing I didn't want to tell people unless I knew it was going to happen.
Right.
And you don't want to show too much stuff, because there's the first prototypes, the first samples, the first everything, you don't even know what's happening yet. So if you put something out there, what is that? You want to show a pretty solid thing. So I was really quiet and just kept saying, I'm working on things in the background, it's super secret project, and I felt really do people believe me anymore?
Yeah, it's really frustrating because I'm doing that constantly. I have a dozen things that are exploratory concepts, and I'll mention them. I might take snaps of them, but they may not go anywhere. And after a while, you feel it feels fraudulent if you even talk about it anymore, because you're like, I started talking about this a year ago, and I still haven't come to a solution on it.
Exactly.
I don't feel I don't know if I'm comfortable showing progress, because it's not solution. It's not the end. It's just, I spent more time working on that same thing I've been working on forever that I never really solidified.
Right.
Well, yeah. I think our suppliers get to see it more than some people because, in terms of like, they're like, well, we did this for you, and now, it's been a year, and it's like, well, it takes time to get everything ready. It takes a lot of time to, and then like you're saying, I think your advice is good. I mean, you also don't want to put something out there that people can't have. Oh, well, here's the thing, but you can't have that for like a year.
Yeah, and then don't like you saying that, and they don't know if they're gonna get it, and then like I don't know, you just don't want to disappoint people, but with that.
And with Kickstarter already adding time to the production schedule because people are funding in advance, it becomes, like if you tease it 6 months before you launch the Kickstarter, and then the Kickstarter takes a couple of months to process, and then delivery and everything. Yeah. And there's Kickstarters, things that I've funded on crowdfunding sites that I'm still waiting on, that still haven't shown up. A year and a half later.
One of them, I think it's 2.5 years for me, and I'm still waiting. I mean, the guy's really good. He updates about it. He lets you know what's going on. This is slow. This, that. I'm really grateful that he does that. So I don't feel cheated at all. But it's like, wow, this is like 2 years, and I think he said he was going to have it done in like 4 months. But I mean, it's Kickstarter, so you get used to it.
Yeah. I mean, I've been fairly. I haven't backed that many projects, but they've all been fairly successful on Kickstarter. Honestly, I just went and talked. I backed a local a project that was done by a local company, and I got to drive over there today to pick up some stuff that was. Because I told them, don't bother shipping it to me. It's close enough. I'll just pick it up. And they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's late." And it's like, "No, it's cool. You're still way ahead of the curve." But it's kind of cool,
right?
The kind of freedom that this brings. I'm really curious. So you're working with a manufacturer to make these elements. What is their take with Kickstarter? Did you get any feedback with them? Because I assume that you're prototyping, and then there's this sort of like long prototype phase because you're not funded when you started this process.
Right. Honestly, I didn't even discuss Kickstarter with them. When I came up with the idea, I was like, I'm just gonna find a way to do it. I'm gonna raise the funds myself. Cons put away some money. So I had pre-planned to at least make the fire element completely on my own. And so they still don't even know that I'm doing a Kickstarter. But yeah. I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No, it's just one of those things where I wonder if there's going to be backlash from suppliers or manufacturers dealing with with Kickstarters that don't get funded, or just not just the extra 3 months time frame that gets inserted into the process with Kickstarter.
I think that when you go into doing something like a Kickstarter, you should intend to have already done it anyway. You have at least some of the resources, maybe some investors, hopefully the money to do it just in case, because it's not fail proof, right? Like you can still fail and get $0.
And still have a viable idea.
Right, exactly. That doesn't mean that people it's not a good idea. It just means it didn't get the right enough didn't get out there enough, right, or whatever.
Well, Kickstarter is sort of a viral process, and not everything goes viral. And there have been a number of companies that have done a Kickstarter. It failed, turned around, and just launched it again at a better time frame.
Tons.
And it succeeds. Oh yeah, it happens all of the time. If you kind of dig in and look at some of the Kickstarters and just sort of look at what they've created and what they've backed, you can see it's a false start. And timing makes a huge difference, depending on the time of year when you're launching your Kickstarter. If people have money, is there something else that is competing?
Is there a giant other Kickstarter that's sucking up all the air?
Yeah.
Like Pebble or Exploding Kittens?
Yeah, right now I was a little nervous with Pebble and Exploding Kittens that people weren't going to focus on mine. Luckily, mine has been consistently in the popular thing in crafts. I'm in crafts, so people are kind of looking specifically for what I'm doing. If I was in tech right now, or if I was in whatever Exploding Kitten was, maybe tech
games.
or games. Yeah. If I was in there, I don't think I'd be doing so hot right now. But I think being in crafts and being the time of the year with people getting their tax returns and all that, it was it's kind of another reason I pulled the trigger when I did. I could have waited 2 more months, but then 2 more months we're in the middle of con season. I wouldn't have been able to focus well on it. I mean, every day is a grind right now for me to promote it. Like, I get up, I email people, I'm tweeting, I'm getting posts ready, I can't imagine trying to do that in the middle of con season when you're like packing, building displays, selling to people.
What was that like, Daniel?
Oh yeah, you did that, right?
Yeah, I think you did it both times. Yeah, it's not fun. I mean, I'm still not great at the middle of a campaign. Like, the middle of the campaign is painful. It's, you know what I mean? Like, there's not a lot new to say about it, and you hate. The last thing I want to do is back my project. You don't want to say that over and over again. You want to say something new about the thing. So that's the worst. So in some ways it benefited me because we funded quickly and then we were on the road.
Right.
And when I'm on the road
from it and not think about it.
I can't think about it because I'm busy on other stuff. So it wasn't so bad to do it that way. And then you had the added benefit of at least being able to promote it at the shows. Not that it was horribly successful, but we finally got that to work somewhat. So yeah, it's not fun.
Do you think that doing the Kickstarter during the camp while you were at a show helped at all? Because like if you're like talking to them about it, do you think anyone leaves the con and then goes and pays on there? Like it's the same thing as like you don't want them to walk away from the booth because you don't know if they're gonna come back for sure.
Right.
Yeah. I have one idea on that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to quickly say that I think the big stumbling block talking about a Kickstarter at a con is there's no Wi-Fi. There's very difficult for them to get data signal. So it's not like they could just scan a QR code or look up the link while they're standing at your booth. And I think that becomes the bigger issue of trying to promote online anything.
Right, because then
convention is that people want to whip out their phone and check it right now, and I can't. I'll come back to it, and then
there's so much stimulus at a con. They saw you, they liked what you had, but then they go to the next booth and they like everything going on there. And by the time you see 15 things you like and talk to 100 people, then you're like, what was that thing I liked? Or you know what? You're probably not even thinking about that. You're probably thinking head, bed, sleep. Like you're not thinking about going on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I don't deny any of that stuff. It's totally true. In fact, the first one, I tried to promote it. I think I made a postcard or something, not effective. But the second one, what I did was I made a visual thing, like a print that promoted it. And I said, take a photo of it with your camera for later. And that worked.
Oh, it did.
That worked for me because at least they were capturing something. They're going to look at their photos after the con probably and dump them to their computer. So that was the only thing I did that was effective. But
that's a good idea.
And I would for sure do that again. So I didn't try to drive them to the site then, but it made it really clear how to get to it once, in that advertisement. So.
Right. That's interesting. I never thought about that because everyone looks at their photos at some point once you get home because you're like, oh, I want to see those cosplayers or this cool stuff, and
yes.
Then you're like, oh, hey, the Kickstarter, that looked interesting, and you can actually pull it up. You're already on the computer at that point. That's the biggest shame about like business cards and promotional material. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've gone through thousands and thousands and thousands of cards, and tons of people excitedly take them, but they took some from 100 other people, and then in their bag of goodies, they might not even look in their bag again.
Yeah, dude, I've got bins from 2008, the Comic-Con 2008. It is all the cards I collected, and they're in this bin, and I still haven't gone through it.
Really?
That's gotta happen. The time machine.
I have like a drawer myself that every time I get a business card from an artist or someone in the creative field, I put it in that drawer with the intent to look at it again. But a lot of times, unless it was like a particular reason that I needed to look into it, I fall into the same category as the rest of humanity and forget about it.
Yeah, taking photographs, I think, is definitely a wise way to go.
Yeah, I like that.
So, Dennis, you are, I think we've talked about this before, you're largely self-taught in terms of being an artist and a graphic designer.
Yeah.
I think you've got some pretty high quality, I think your stuff is really high quality. I think your design sense is really great, and I was really surprised to find out that you didn't have a graphic design background.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I just, I started finding things I like, and I just study it. I just stare at it. Like why am I so drawn to this image? And I just until I figure it out, I don't move on. And then when I'm working on my stuff, I'm like, I really like that and that, and then I start trying it myself, and sometimes it ends up in my work, sometimes it doesn't. But that for me, I kind of did the self study or whatever, instead of having someone teach me. I mean, to be fair, I did take some classes. I took one or two, like I took a InDesign class, Illustrator class, and I took like a basic art class where I mean, do you see those statues back there? The
naked ones?
Yeah, yeah. I got those from an art class where we had to learn shading and stuff. So I took that, but that was about it. And I have a hard time learning what someone wants me to learn. They're like, today we're going to learn how to draw a square. And I'm like, I've been drawing squares since I was like 3. I don't want to, like what I'm interested in right now is how to draw a girl's hair better. And there's not a class for that, or like I want to draw this better. And I'd much rather focus a 48-hour period or 100 hours or whatever hours I need to learn a specific thing than go and get the broad strokes of things and not perfect something. So that's kind of why I went the self-taught route, because it worked better for me, But that's not for everyone either. Like when people ask me about that, I'm like, well, if you want to go to art school, go to art school. Like for me, it just I don't like school. I don't like being down a certain path. I want to go over here and then come back and then go over there and.
Yeah, as long as you're self-motivated, yeah, you can direct your own education, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I did though. I started drawing when I was like, I don't know, like 3 or 4. I used to draw like Tiny Toons and Sonic the Hedgehog and all kinds of things from that era. And like when I look at those drawings, like I'm blown away. I guess I just really just sat. I mean, I'm an only child, so I spent a lot more time than I realized sitting in front of paper and pencil, and just sketch and draw all day.
Sure.
So yeah, just I guess I'm 29 years, no, maybe 26 years of working on it will kind of start to show up in your work a little bit, maybe.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So, what's next for you this year? What are you excited about after your Kickstarter and all that fulfillment kind of gets done?
Well, post-mortem sleep, hopefully. But yeah, I got to sleep at least a day before I go to Emerald City, man. The campaign ends on the 20th, and a buddy of mine's coming up from San Diego on the 24th, and we're hitting the road up to Seattle. So I got like 4 days of kind of like, but those 4 days are just going to be packing everything, getting ready for the con. But I mean, that's the status quo. Looking forward, as far as like what I'm stoked about with my art and everything is really like, if this plush is successful and people are into them, and I bring them to the show and they're selling well, I honestly want to continue exploring it. I'm actually far more passionate about it than I ever thought it would be. Like I grew up collecting toys, so it almost makes sense that I would, but I didn't think about it till I started making them. And then I was like, wow, like all these things, like now I can make a toy do the thing I always wished it could do. I mean, isn't that the motivation for your posters and for t-shirts? You want t-shirts that have the slogans you want. So that's what's really making me excited this year, is get these made, promote them, just try to, like maybe get them in boutiques or whatever, like, and make the next line. Start working on the next line immediately. So that's really my hope and focus for the next year or 2. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I could bring them out to cons and they'd be like anything else. It's all a risk. They could flop, and it'll just be another product you have on your table, or it could be the next big product that I focus on. So you never know, right?
And you have to keep exploring. I mean, that's the whole point of being an artist, is to be able to grow and explore.
Right. I mean, if I got deterred by like the first unsuccessful thing I ever did, then I wouldn't be here. So I won't let anything stop me. If I have an idea, I'm gonna keep trying it. I don't know if I told either of you this, but my first con, I made $1. $1. I think my table cost $80 or something, and I made $1. But I wasn't gonna have any of that. I needed to keep going. You know, like I was like, this doesn't make sense. I can make more than $1.
You're a survivor.
Yeah.
This is interesting to me. So, what was your mindset in the moment? Like, you know, that weekend. What was your thoughts on that? Were you thinking like, oh my God, this is horrible, or
other than wanting to kill myself at the moment?
No,
you know, like.
I mean, I've had bad shows.
Yeah.
But I just think this is a great lesson to learn. Like in the moment, were you going, this is just a start? I'm just starting out here, or
I took it that way. I mean, like luckily a couple things were in play before that. I had gone to cons. I had seen, you know, booths of people that I admired and aspired to be like, and then during it, it was also like, so Ape wasn't my first show. I always forget that. My first show was this comic and collectibles something in I don't know, somewhere in L.A. And like it was in a mall, like a strip mall, and all the audience was just old ladies, like, you know, just going to old like boutiques and stuff. And my artwork at the time had like blood, and it was like really gory and dark. And so I didn't blame them for not liking my stuff. The audience was apparently not my audience. It was too obvious, because an old woman would look over and she's like, oh, and then just keep, you know what I mean? Like she'd be curious of what I was doing, because like, oh look, this young guy is trying to do something, and then they're like, oh
God.
Yeah, exactly, and they just get away as quickly as they could. So I wasn't offended. I mean, obviously your ego takes a little bit for it, but it was humbling, you know, at the same time. And I took it all in as what it was. Like I started at a really low point, so that nothing could go. There was nothing but up from there, right? I realized that the audience wasn't for me, so I need to pinpoint where my audience is located. And then I had to also, to some extent, censor my creativity. I couldn't necessarily do, because gore wasn't necessarily what I wanted. I said necessarily like 9 times. I didn't really want to do gory stuff. It's just what I had drawn at the time was. So I realized like I need to draw what I like, but what people like combined as one thing. And I mean, the one thing that sold, probably inspired me to make more things like it. But yeah, I just did my best. I definitely was bummed that weekend, though. I think on my way home, I went and got a donut, and I don't even like donuts. It was just.
But it seems like you learned a lot of very difficult lessons.
Yeah.
From that one core experience.
Exactly.
Because I mean, from my experience, I kind of started out, and it was much more of a. I have no idea if I made any money. I doubt I made any money on my first show. Like if I were to add up all of the time and material costs and everything, I wouldn't be surprised if I was in the negative on it. But I was doing it for the experience. So I wasn't even focused on that. I was more like, oh, this will be interesting. This will be something I can, you know, really challenge myself. So I was far more caught up in the challenge of doing it than I was in the profitability. Like, could it even sustain me? I had a full-time job, so I wasn't even thinking in those terms. And I had, you know, so I kind of, that's where it started, was in that perspective. So it took me a while to learn, like, how to hone my craft as far as, like, knowing, like, I need to do something that I'm passionate about, but that can also sell. And I need to find a place where those two circles.
The middle ground.
Yeah.
Right.
I can't, if I go too far one way, then I don't like it. Even if it's selling, I don't like it.
Right.
Or the other way, I like it, but it's not selling. You know, so it's, you know, that's one of those things that you kind of have to learn it, and it's really easy. I fear it's really easy for someone to have a decent first show and not learn those lessons, and then really struggle with that over a long period of time.
Right, especially when they get their first kick, right? Like, you did great on your first show. Actually, a buddy of mine, that happened. He did fantastically at his first show, and then the first time he did bad, he questioned his whole world. He just didn't understand, like, how could it go from a high point to a low point? He was doing great. Like, he thought like this was going to be his new full-time job. So it's good to, like, start from that point and learn the struggles and know that, because there's always going to be ups and downs.
Yeah, and they'll still be there regardless. Like I've, you know, many of my shows broke. You know, my biggest shows from this last year all broke their previous records, and yet still had a good chunk of my shows this year were just crap.
Yeah.
Just like my, thousands of people and none of them are my audience, like that kind of a show where, well,
Yeah.
you were there, we had Salt Lake, so,
Right.
it's one of those things where it doesn't matter where you are as an artist, where you are as, a booth, where you are as a company. If you're
Hmm.
doing these conventions, you can still find yourself in a bad experience. And
Right.
if you've learned the lessons, then it's a lot easier for you to recognize, okay, this isn't my market, or this show isn't the right kind of show for me, or I'm not reaching the right customers here.
Right.
I planned for the wrong, I expected this customer, I got a different kind of customer. So
Hmm.
with that experience, I think it's a lot easier to kind of take in those shows. They suck, they wear at your soul, but
Yes, definitely do.
you can at least compartmentalize them, and you don't look over like, oh my god, that year was hell.
Right.
We had a lot of rough experiences as far as like, we'll try the show out, that show sucked. We'll try the show out, that show sucked.
Right.
But at the same time, like I said, we had our great shows were greater than ever. So,
It's interesting, like how last year I cut back significantly on my shows, and I did better per show, but financially I did worse than previous years because I stopped exploring as many. I didn't want to take as many risks because I had certain plans of things I was working on, and I needed to start putting money aside. So I was like, well, I can throw $200 or $500 into this con and take that risk, or I could set that aside to make sure that this other project's going to happen. And so I started cutting back. And it's weird now, after being in my 6th year now, that like I'm starting to re-question shows, like because the whole thing starts changing for you once you've had more successes. You don't. It's almost like, do I want to do a small show and maybe make $50? Like, and who knows? That could be a couple $100 show or whatever, $1,000 show. Like, you have no idea.
Well,
Um,
those success factors are always changing. I mean,
mhm.
you just said it. I mean, when we started, I was like, we made $200 profit. Yeah, I'm victorious. And I did Ape for 5 years, and Ape was never a great show, but I still, I was willing to make no money there for a long time, or not much. And now I wouldn't, nothing against Ape, but it doesn't make sense for us to spend our time at a show like that. So
Right.
you're always changing.
There's a lot of factors that go into it. It's like travel, like the time you're tired. Like Ape is a 7-hour drive for me, and then it's like a couple $100 in gas, hotels, and I'm just like you, is a kind of low profit show for me. I mean, luckily the booths were only, or the tables, I guess they're not even booths, were like a couple $100 or maybe $500 or something. So it's like it wasn't extremely hard to make the money back, but how drained I'd be coming home. And like it was just like I'd rather be at home creating a thing and turn that into a new product, or find another show or something instead of going to this one.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
um,
it's easy to get yourself into a rut with shows. You've
mhm.
done the show for 6 years. You feel kind of obligated, and walking away, from a show that's been a regular part of your routine,
Yeah,
even if it
especially
isn't performing well.
you have your return fans and friends and all that you don't want to disappoint them because they're like, oh, I'll see you next year, and you're like,
Mm.
And that fear of missing out is a huge motivator.
hmm definitely is. Earlier when we were talking about the starting point, when people ask me like how I got started or what they should do, I have a hard time giving people advice, but I always tell them to start small, because don't shoot for Comic-Con, because so many people like Comic-Con's it. Comic-Con is the gold standard. That's the show I need to be at. But a lot of big people are leaving Comic-Con because they're not making the money there. I mean, they're making money, but then on top of all the expenses, it's better. And I think I've had discussions with Daniel about this, to build like a local audience around you. That is a lot of cheaper shows where you can have people like build up, a little following, fans, whatever, who like expect that you're going to be at the next LA event, or that kind of thing. And then you get to get all that growth, because you don't want to start at Comic-Con and have 2 books at a table. Like that's my booths today in comparison to, and I'm blown away when I look at Daniel's booths. Like, it's insane. If you don't do the slow path, and you start at the top point with nothing, you change so much in that time. It's basically what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And it's good to start small because you have probably a book or an art print or whatever, and that's not enough to fill the booths we have. All of our booths are big towers now.
And that's it. I kind of think of like you want to earn your success. You don't want to buy it.
Yeah.
In that sense, because it's
I
you
agree with
can
that, yeah.
you can roll into a con. You can throw down a whole bunch of money. You can get a massive freaking booth, and you might be able to cover your expenses on it. But
Well, there's the key right there. You might be.
yeah, and it's not like you've really gotten the benefit of growing.
Yeah, and also it's not as triumphant either. Like I remember, like the first time I ever went to Comic-Con was the year before I started cons, and I was like, in 5 years I'm gonna make it to Comic-Con. I'm gonna have a booth, and I had this big ambitious goal. So when I got there, when I was finally at a booth, like it was like this moment of like, I did it. Like this is so awesome. This is all my hard work has been paying off. This is great. And so you don't have those like awesome milestones to work for if you just start at the top, because then everything is going to feel watered down. The small shows are going to feel beneath you or whatever, and they're not. No show is beneath you. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just good to do that.
And it gives you the ability to appreciate the event. One of my favorite shows from the last year wasn't a big show, and it wasn't even a profitable show, but it was a show that had that kind of energy, that a small, like first time kind of vibe.
Right.
There was some excitement to it. It was cool, and it was especially rewarding after going to big shows that have been around for a long time, but were a bad audience and a bad experience. And then going to a small one where it's like, yeah, they don't have that many people. It was a really small show, and it's only their second or third year, and it's it's growing slowly. But I kind of enjoy that part. I guess what it is I don't want to race to the peak.
Yeah.
I don't it's like I don't want to be well, let's peak now. Like I kind of enjoy the like watching it grow and enjoying the success of it all, as opposed to immediately being at the I remember way back 2 years ago, this show was so much better, So easy to get to the cynical stage of it. And I think that's what we're seeing with San Diego, is a lot of people are at that point now where they're looking at it from just the numbers and going, oh, this wasn't very profitable. And it's because the experience is gone. They're not enjoying the show.
Right.
It was awesome, actually. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, all I was going to say is it's a part of that too is I sort of feel like for those shows that I've been going to for years and years, I feel like I'm a little bit a part of it. Like I obviously I get to participate, but like I've been doing Phoenix. It was not a very big show when we started. It was a few thousand attendees, and so I felt like I got to be kind of part of its success. Even if it was a small piece of that, I was there. And so
yeah.
Anyway, I enjoy them,
How long have you been doing Phoenix? Is that one of the ones you've been doing for 9 years, or was it around that long?
Yeah, it's been around for 14 or 15 years, I think. But yeah, 9 years for us.
Wow, I've only done that one maybe 4, maybe 5 years. I mean, it's one of my favorites. It's definitely going to stay on the docket. That and Emerald City, like especially being part of, like you were saying with the growth thing, like I've seen both of them grow in my time there, and I just want to continue being there and being part of it, because it's crazy to experience it. Like it's like watching a child grow or something. I mean, it's a different thing, but
those two shows in particular nurture their communities. Like they're definitely an output of the community, and I think that's what makes those great.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that's really difficult to copy. Like you can't just create that. So it's interesting, and that's one of the reasons why I like to do new shows, even though the odds are they're going to suck. Is the hope of finding that again, like finding another one of those. You
sound like a drug addict who needs his next little.
But I mean, if you think about what we do as artists, I know from my experience, like that's what I'm doing. When I'm creating art, I'm looking for that fix.
Right.
I'm looking for that moment of inspiration, You know,
That's true. Yeah.
getting that vibe of what you were talking about, like staring at the designs and trying to find that element. That's what we're doing. And I feel the same way. I mean, I come from a theatrical background, so I feel the same way about a show. It is an art form unto itself, and
Right.
I hope that a convention can find that spark. And even if the show's small, like if you look at the numbers, like they'll report the attendance for the shows, like they'll rank cons, which
Yeah.
is always kind of spotty, but they'll rank the cons, and it's not like our favorite shows are at the top of those lists.
No, then there were like 3 or 4 or 5, maybe 10 down.
Yeah, exactly. But they're rating how many people walk through the door, but they're not rating the energy level that those people bring with them. They're not
Right. rating
rating the vibe in the exhibitors hall. You know,
Yeah, you can't rate that community.
Yeah, and that's why it's, you know, I'm looking for. I love Emerald City. I love Phoenix. I hope that there's other ones out there like that we can find. You know,
Right.
and that's why it's like I'll book my shows, and then I will keep risking. I will keep risking on another show, because if I can find one more Emerald City or one more, you know, Phoenix, then that's worth the
It's worth the
12
struggles, the pain.
Yeah, it's worth the struggles. It's worth the disappointments if you can find, you know, if you can find that show that, you know, that turns into that. Because, I mean, those places are unique, but they, you know, it all involves artists. It all involves people with passion. It all involves the same, you know, types of people. So there's no reason that another show in another state couldn't capture their version of it. I think
Right.
the problem is when people try to just, and this is my big complaint with this explosion of Comic Cons, is that they're all trying to capture San Diego. They don't understand San Diego. They just look at the numbers. They're just trying to capture the numbers.
A couple of those brand new ones, I think we've all attended them. Like, I'm just like, they're so up their kind of asses about, you know, presenting something rather than it being something. That it when you walk in, it just feels empty. You know, like
it's hollow.
Yeah, you feel like you just walked into, like, there's tons of people there, but you feel like you walked into this empty room because no one even knows why they're there. No one like is excited or inspired. Like it just feels like this strange mixer where we're all kind of like, why are we here? Who are you? What's this about? Like,
well, just like an artist can buy the perception of success by spending a lot of money on a booth, but not actually earning it, the cons can do the exact same thing. They can throw the money at it. They can mimic it. There's, you know, there's professionals who do nothing but conventions, so they can just look at a Comic Con and go, oh, this is how we would run this. This is how we deal with, you know, the unions. This is how we do load-in. This is how we do vending for food. And like, they can nail all that. We know where to get our banners printed. But that's not creating the energy. Hey, we just need to get that cosplay thing here. Those cosplay kids will do the rest. Like, they don't understand the alchemy that's involved in it. And,
well, it's simple. It basically is a wrestling ring. If you can get one of those in the center of the hall, you have the magic. The magic's inside of you.
How many wrestling ring shows have you done?
Also important.
How many wrestling ring shows have you guys done?
I think only a couple.
Yeah.
Every one of them. Man, I just want, when I see the wrestling ring, I want to ask for a refund.
Yes. It's probably a good idea.
But at that point, your contract won't allow you.
Questions like that, booking new shows.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we've talked to conventions, and like Ev asked just a few little questions, kind of like, hey, so you know, are you guys having so and so there? Like, you know, just to kind of get a vibe of what's going on. And thankfully, we've gotten the no, we don't do no. So, you know,
that's usually a good sign. Yeah.
Yeah, because they understand.
Well, you get some of these conventions. I've seen this a couple of times, like the zombie experience stuff, where they'll do the you know, run through the zombie survival room.
Yeah.
And it strikes me as we get a discount if we book another hall kind of thing. Like, we got a bulk discount on the floor, but we don't actually have enough to actively, you know, engage this much space. So we'll just throw something that takes up a lot of space kind of over there as filler, and, you know, doesn't necessarily add anything to it.
I felt like those. My perception on it is like they're trying to grasp so many demographics, like the wrestling ring. Maybe we can get people. WWE fans are just like totally crazy fanatics. Let's get them in here.
Let's get them.
Yeah, the zombie people. That's a fad right now. Let's get that zombie thing over there.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of focusing on making it a zombie con, which would like genuinely get that audience, they're like, well, let's just try to get from every little thing, and hopefully one of these brings the right amount of people.
And they look at shows like San Diego, which have had successful, like, Walking Dead experience, and they're like, oh, we could do something like that. Let's put that in there because that worked in San Diego. Let's do that. And it's like, you don't understand that was AMC The Walking Dead doing that. Like, that's not your local haunt doing it.
It's the same thing as an artist trying to be everything to everybody, right? That's just not a great method for any business.
Right. Yeah, because then at that point you have no core thing that people can identify you for, and values. Like, it's like, well, why do I like you? Why do I want to be here? How do we connect? That's gone. There's no connection anymore. You're just like hoping the thing that you're connected to is somewhere there, and you're not going to make that effort to look for that.
And if you think about it, if you have one booth that can cater to everybody there, you're going to end up with nothing but booths that cater to the same stuff over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you want to be unique. You want to have something that is special, and part of being special is not appealing to everybody in the same way.
And that's another reason I think people need to start in the beginning, like how I did from a crappy show, because you really have to learn your voice of what is unique about you. Because if you jump in, just like a con, I can walk into Comic-Con and see Daniel's booth, see your booth, see tons of other people's booths, and be like, okay, that's popular, that's successful, okay. And then I go home, I map it out, I figure out the formula of what looked popular everywhere. I can go to the con, I can recreate the same booth, have the same products, the same thing, but you just now recreated something else, and people probably won't care because they didn't watch you develop into that, for one thing. And then you're not speaking to a particular audience, you're speaking to the 5 booths audiences, and people don't know that you're speaking to them per se, I guess.
Right.
It's kind of hard to phrase those into the right thought there, but that's how I put that together.
Silence.
Yeah, whoa.
Well, we are getting close to our hour, so now this is where the awkward silence starts coming in. So how many shows do you have, are you scheduled for this year, Dennis?
It's the same as last year. I didn't book. I think I have 4 this year, which is just a total drag. But I kind of this year decided that because I wanted to do the plush thing, so I had to set aside more and more money. I pretty much had all the money to make almost 2 of them, and that's enough to do 3 or 4 shows. And so instead of doing WonderCon, I kept going back and forth. Should I do WonderCon? If I go back, I want to get a booth. I don't want to be in small press again. So I need $1,000 for that. I think is the price of the booth, not $300 or $400, which it would normally be. So I kind of skipped out on way too many cons. Right now I just have Emerald City, Phoenix, San Diego. I know there's another one. I just can't think of what it would be. Those are like the 3 I always do, so I know it's those 3. Is that? No, I don't know. There's another one. I'll think about it for a second. Say something else and I'll tell you.
Well, you picked some good shows, obviously.
Cream of the crap.
It is difficult to balance the doing the cons and the time in between the cons. And, and especially because when you're doing the conventions, you pretty much sign up, at the convention for the next year.
Right. If you don't do that,
you're booking in a year in advance.
If you don't do the book in advance thing,
you're SOL.
Yeah, you're going to get the worst location against the back wall, and you may as well not have even done it. So that's why I could have done WonderCon up to like maybe a month or so ago, but I was like, I don't want to be in small press in the back corner. Like I can't do it. The other con, by the way, I'm doing is Anime Expo. Somehow I do okay at an anime con. I don't know. Yeah, most of my friends at anime cons, that it's not too great, but I think I sparked that right in between ground where I was influenced by anime, so you can kind of see it in my characters, but I don't mimic anime like a lot of the other people do. So they're like, "Ooh, this looks unique enough." So I get right into that little ground where I do okay, but I don't know if I do other ones. That's just the one. It's right here, and yeah, you do. Neither of you do them, right? Anime cons?
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I've done some like I did Designer Con once. I've done a couple other ones, but yeah, that goes back to knowing your audience.
I think knowing because of that, I think I'm going to do Decon this year. I did Decon back when which is Designer Con. I did it back when I only had the comic and it wasn't my audience. I just really wanted to do Decon really bad, but like people would look at my prints and like none of that's collectible, and they just keep going.
Yep.
And I'm hoping now with the toys and stuff, these look cute and collectible and designer.
That'll help a lot.
Got a potential there. And that was the thing, was that, yeah, it was just, like, I went and realized, okay, this isn't... They asked me to go, actually. I got invited to go to do Designer Con. And I dug the show. I liked it. It's just the audience was clearly, toy-focused. Like, they dialed in, like, shoes, toys. Like, we know what we want.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not my crowd. And over the years, I've kind of learned that, tabletop gaming is kind of my crowd. Like, that's much
Makes
more,
sense.
in the Venn diagram, they fit in. So I do really well at Gen Con. And on top of that, I really enjoy gaming cons. Just as a person, I enjoy gaming cons. So, there's a benefit there.
Well, plus you've been a gamer.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes sense.
The other issue with like an anime con is the pop culture, like the fan art aspect of it.
It's real rough to be in the center of that.
Yeah, it's just like, I'll constantly be asked, "Oh, do you do a blah blah blah?" And it's like, well, no, that's somebody's property.
Property. I'm not going to take their property. Yeah.
I don't do that. I don't do a My Little Pony fez. I don't do a yes, I understand that a character was drawn with a fez at one point, but that doesn't mean that doesn't give me carte blanche on using somebody else's property.
Right. Definitely. I mean, that actually, I'm curious about that. If someone approached you, like a company for like a licensing company, would you make licensed ones? If like My Little Pony is like, hey, would you like to make fezzes with our character on it? Would that be something you'd do? Because I've thought about licensing and where that goes and that creative path.
I've done a little. Well, I've done custom work for companies, so I've done their work, their design for them. But the only licensing I do, I have permission, which isn't even really licensing, from the Sons of the Desert organization to do the Sons of the Desert Fez, because I had a bunch of that's the Laurel and Hardy fan club, and I had a bunch of their members for years ask me if I could do one. So we finally tracked it down, and they said, as long as you do this and this and this, we're cool with it. And then I've just done stuff directly with artists. So as far as like licensing stuff, I do it directly with the artist.
Right.
And
that's literally the only way I'd feel comfortable doing it. Like if I was to do art prints of something, I would want the artist to be working on it with me, or like I have some kind of legal ground around it. Otherwise, I don't want to create something and I just sit there nervous the entire convention or whatever, that someone's going to say something to me and that my money is like blood diamonds or whatever, like not that extreme, but it just feels dirty.
It is.
I can't do it.
No, but like we do fezzes. I've done three designs. Three designs. I've done a couple color variations with Mike Mignola. But that was all up front, talked with him first, took the time, signed paperwork with them, made sure they were cool with it, and now it's a relationship that, it's a lot easier because we've done a couple of them with them, but it's not the focus of my business.
It's kind of a tricky thing, because if you look at look what Funko's done. Funko used to have some of their own characters even early on, and now they're full on this giant licensing company, and I've thought about the same thing. I'm like, well, clearly there's money in that direction, but I don't know if that's really what I want to spend my time doing exactly. But but it's been very successful for them, for sure.
That's actually what got me into the licensing idea, was pop vinyls, seeing them, and I was like, wow, this is such a crazy, I love this, the shape, this is cool, like, I want to see what else they can do with it, and then it gets you thinking about that kind of stuff.
We've talked with companies here and there just to see, like, like we saw potential, so we reached out and talked with them, and it's difficult to get to the right people. But ultimately, like, we talked with the BBC about what the situation would be, and we're not remotely a big enough company. Like, they have a line, like, we can't even consider you until you've crossed this line. Like, you have in this many stores, you make this much money annually, you can guarantee blah blah. Yeah, so I mean, they were really
makes
cool
sense on a business standpoint, but
yeah. But we weren't, it's one of those things where it's like, we're not looking necessarily for exclusivity, we're looking for permission, but from their perspective, it's like, it's not worth the effort unless it's, an exclusive legal contract. So they were really cool. They liked what, they really dug what we did, but they basically said, here's the minimum requirements. And that was kind of the end of it. And I've talked with other people who've worked with licenses about companies. So I'm like, hey, I've kind of considered, and and get feedback from that route. But just from my perspective, as an artist, I really only want to work. I prefer to work with an artist. Like, if the guy, like, I work with Mike Mignola to do a Hellboy Fez. I didn't go to the publishing company, the movie studio, like, I went to the guy who owns the rights to the character, because I would rather celebrate the source than the most recent commercial product.
Right. That's cool.
So it's, and I'm not against the idea if something like that were to come up, but it definitely changes the focus of what I do.
It would completely change your entire business. Like, you'd have to
and it has the potential to completely change my business and completely do what I, change what I do on a daily basis.
Right. It's interesting. Like, doing this for the 6th year now. Like, I started wanting to do webcomics, and then I kind of walked away from webcomics to do the art thing, and now I'm exploring the toy thing. And you kind of have to be open to the change, because as long as it's within your moral grounds and your excitement and enthusiasm, but you got to be open-minded to whatever is the potential change, because I think we've all seen at cons, like, prints are oversaturated now, T-shirts are oversaturated, and you have to change your business as the business is changing. And I mean, I think that's why licensing even kind of red flagged for me. I just saw that, like, toys are now, because I remember when I was a kid, you would only get officially licensed Star Wars toys from Hasbro Toys, and they were in this exact package thing. But now you can get Funko ones, you can get I don't know, and like stuffed animals from another company, Lego, which that was not in existence before. So it's definitely, that's the change in the creative business now, or at least the merchandising business.
But at the same time, you have to realize that with licensing, you are competing on a different level. You're not competing on creativity. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, it becomes push marketing, which is my big fear. Like, I don't want to spend my time all focused on push marketing. I'm not a salesman. Like, I'm not the kind of, guy that's going to be cold calling people on the phone and pushing it in there. So that obviously means that I'm going to change that direction. I have to hire somebody that's going to take care of that stuff.
Right.
Because I know if I were responsible for distribution, I wouldn't do well. If I'm responsible for being creative, that's where I'm comfortable.
I fall into that struggle constantly as what I do becomes more and more of a business. Where it's like you find that I started as just a creator, and that's all I wanted to do, and then you find that place where you're now having to become the salesman a little bit, the businessman, the all those things, and I'm in that uncomfortable spot, sort of, where I'm completely divided into two types of people, and my goal is to one day get to a place where I can hire someone to take that part of me back, so I can go back to the true form of me, the artist, and I can create, and I just have someone I trust to take care of that stuff for me. And at least here's a good plus about that, though, just like everything else we were talking about. I'm doing that from the bottom, and I'm learning the whole business aspect of it. So if I have to get to the stage to hire someone, I'll know they're not screwing me at all. I'll know, you know, I can even like be like, hey, can we look into these avenues? And then they'll go research it and do it for me. But at least I have the sense of what's happening, which that's an interesting thing for a lot of artists, that when they have that instant success, or like, you know, they just stayed artists for so long and then someone picked them up, they have no idea what these sides of it is. So I'm definitely grateful for the cons and all that kind of stuff for that, because wherever this business goes, hopefully I'll have a good sense of what art business is.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and I think it makes you you know, we're commercial artists at this point, you know, so having that background really helps us, you know, generate ideas that are more profitable and, you know, that may be more sensible, you know, and sometimes yes, sometimes no, but, you know, having that is helpful.
Yeah, you need to be aware of that side of the equation.
Right.
Even if you're not comfortable with it, even if you're not necessarily good at it, you have to at least be experienced enough to be aware of it, so that you know how. Because even if you had someone full time taking care of that aspect of your business for you, you'd still have to be aware of how that aspect, you know, like how that side affects your creative side.
Right.
You couldn't just go, now you're responsible for selling the stuff and taking care of the business.
Yeah,
I'm going to go off here and create just random crap that makes no goddamn sense.
Right.
You know, like, you still have to be thinking about the business side of it.
Well, what I like about it is it's working within restraints, right? There's limitations. There's a box. You know, I can't just like, I'm going to make gold top hats tomorrow. I can't, you know, that's not a good idea. So,
scratch that off my to-do list.
Well, copyright, steamcrow.com.
It's interesting, the whole working inside a constrained box thing. I've had to learn that a lot in a couple years, especially working with Ollie and Sean from Decobot with Destin Legends. We had a lot of limitations because it's a card game. You know, we had all these creative ideas, and it came from RPGs and you know, different like fantasy books, and I was influenced by animes and stuff, so I was putting that in there. But we had this box, and if it didn't fit in it, that idea was just like, okay, well, that's going to set aside, and you know, go plan it and see if it grows into something. But you know, at least we didn't have this like so many resources that we could just keep throwing everything in it and just make like the absolute worst thing ever, because it's just nonsense. You have no idea what's going on. Like, you give it to a new person and they're like, what is this? I don't understand. It's like, it's everything. Don't you get it?
It does it all.
Yeah.
It's an umbrella and a game.
That's definitely not good.
We're penciling out an idea for a game and got myself, like, immediately went, oh man, I've gone, like, kitchen here. I really have to dial this back.
That's interesting. That's actually, back to the other question you had, Daniel, that's another thing that eventually I'd like to explore, especially being in partnership with Decobot, is in 2 or 3 years from now, maybe developing a game based off of my character's creations and the style. You know, I now I'm starting to have the resources for that, but I wouldn't want to jump into it anytime soon until I had a solid idea, because if I started it now, it would just be a horrible idea. It would just crash and burn so fast.
Yeah, a lot of thought has to go into a good game.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, that's funny because I did my first Gen Con and then I was immediately like, I'm going to create a game. Right. And then luckily, you know, I started penciling stuff out. Well, yeah, and a voice in my head said, maybe you should spend a little bit more time playing games before you start writing games, because you haven't, you haven't opened up any of your board games or tabletop games in years.
Right.
Because I started thinking, like, okay, then I have to get to playtesting, and realized I'm not even competent to be a playtester.
Right.
Because I don't have any real experience gaming.
That's super interesting, because I jumped in the webcomic thing just seeing webcomic artists do it, and a lot of webcomic artists do this where they see it's possible, so they jump in and they just start writing comics and putting them out there. And it's not that I'm not proud of L.A.W.L.S Volume 1 or Reader Rabbit or any of the things I created, but by the time that I had started that, I was so lost in the idea of creating rather than like really knowing comics, because I had stopped reading comics for like 10 years. I didn't have a comic book in my hand at all before I started doing it. So now, during my kind of respite from this whole thing, I've actually spent a lot of time reading comics in my free time when I'm not working on the plush and Corvink and cons and all that. And I feel like I'll be so much more prepared when I come back. Because I mean, I want to finish L.A.W.L.S eventually. I have a kind of planned ending, but it's amazing. The planned ending that I had, I think it might be 2 years ago now, maybe even 3, when I kind of went on the hiatus, to now, it's like, wow, I'm glad, because whatever I'm going to produce when I come back, this story is so much more solid. It actually makes sense to points previously, you know, and there's little like openings to the little other things I want to do, and it's so good to have a good plan when you're doing anything. Not, I mean, jump in, but
yeah, there's
jump in to an extent. Don't just stand outside of the pool and be like, man, I would love to swim one day. You got to put your foot in there, but don't just think you're a diver immediately.
Right. Well,
gotta build your craft.
Yeah.
Right.
Appreciate the craft. I mean, that's the thing, is that you don't want to go through the whole process and not be able to appreciate what you've created.
Right. Yeah.
And part of that is appreciating the effort that goes into creating something.
Right.
But yeah, you kind of have to do it and learn, because it's really easy. I think as you age, it's really easy to focus on the planning side of things, like the why you can't do something. And so it's like when we're young, we jump in, no plans, no idea, no sense of our own mortality. And then as you age, that tips to the other side, where it's like, I'm too old to jump in and learn something new. You know, I'm too old to learn how to code, or learn how to use Photoshop, or
Right.
Obama.
Yeah. So you have to. It's an interesting balance that you have to do. So I talked myself down from the ledge on the game, but then I have to, now that I've kind of like pulled back enough to look at it and realize what mistakes I was making, now I have to push myself back towards the ledge. It's a lot easier, like, once you stepped back from a project, to stay back from it and go, oh well, I see everything that's wrong with it now, and I see none of the excitement of doing it. So yeah, it's a challenge.
It's interesting. Go ahead.
I don't know if you guys ever feel like this, but I feel like at first I had a lot of naivety and arrogance to just dive in there and do it and just make stuff. And now I'm like, well, I feel like I know less now than I knew before.
Yeah, I definitely feel that way.
You know more about what you don't know.
For sure, I feel that way these days.
It's definitely a huge struggle between both of those existences because of that. Like, you do need that spark of inspiration that you feel like that you're just going to jump over the cliff and see what happens as you're falling to get something going. But then, now that you know that there's potential death down there, you question it a little bit, and like, you still need to want to jump to get it to happen. Which, I'm really glad that I just pulled the trigger on these things, because I could have questioned it like forever and not done it, but you have to, at some point, at least get to the edge and just dangle from it. Even if you're not going to jump, at least look at what's down there.
Squeeze your feet a little bit. And...
yeah, feel a little bit of the fear. Fear is a huge motivator to keep creating and all that too.
Yes.
I'm sure you all know that.
This beard is made of just pure fear.
I can tell.
The excess fear growing out of your face.
It's just shooting out, yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, we probably hit our time deadline, I'm thinking. So anyway, I wanted to thank Denis Caron for joining us tonight. So thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah.
I'm glad we finally did it. We've been talking about doing it eventually, and
yes, this has been one of those episodes that we've been trying to schedule for way too long, and then we both forget to talk about it again, and then.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys were able to move your schedules around for me, and we were able to do it. So thank you. It was fun.
Oh, our pleasure.
So where can we find you, Dennis, on the internets?
Well, either DenisCaron.com, which is DENIS, one N, and then Caron, which is CARON.com, or L.A.W.L.S.co, not com. That's always a confusing thing, which is L.A.W.L.S, not L.O.L.S. And then if you want to check out my Kickstarter, I actually made a quick short link. It's lols.co/ks for Kickstarter. Or just, go to Kickstarter and look into, or type in Magical Element Plush Toys. And that's pretty much all the things that are me. Oh, and Corvink, if you want to buy my things. Corvink.com.
Does your dog have a web presence?
No, but he really should. A lot of people tell me he's cute. I mean, look at him. Isn't he kind of adorable?
He's doing pretty good.
Are you cute, Winslow? Yeah. I want to give him an Instagram, so eventually you might see that he's more famous than me online than I ever will be because he's cuter than me.
And Jason, where are you found on the internet?
You can, of course, find me, fezrama.com. I'm Fezmonger on the Instagram and the Twitter, and we're on the Facebook and the Google Plus and all that jazz. Daniel, your addresses?
I think I need to have a new one called like awkwardglances.com, but I don't have that. Or awkward talker. So it's like
I'm pretty sure Awkward Talker is probably available.
Awkward Talker is available. You can find me at steamcrow.com. Google Steam Crow. I know it's a mess being me, but steamcrow.com. Look me up. Say hi.
Make sure to look up Steve Crow. That's
and look up Steve Crow as well. Yeah, though.
I like Steam Cow.
Cow. Yeah, that's wonderful. So yeah. Anyway,
that'll all be. If you bother to watch this video, it'll all be in the about info, show notes junk at the bottom of the screen. And if you do bother to watch this video, thank you for watching this video. We don't thank you at the beginning because we want there to be some kind of incentive to really,
Yes, the thank you is the reason they watch.
Yeah, they're watching for my approval, which I do not spread around at all. So this is your one shot at it. You watch the hour and a half of us yammering on about shows, and then you get a little bit of approval from me.
You get some gratitude.
That's right. Goddamn gratitude. All right. Well, thank you. We're off next week. Daniel has to pack everything up and go do a show. What show are you doing next week?
Tucson Festival of Books. So a big
Is it
old.
gonna rain?
I think not. I hope not. The rain would make it painful, but it's huge. So we're looking forward to it. It's fun.
But I think we will be back in 2 weeks. That should be right around the time for our big panel discussion, Emerald City Hype Spectacular, that is hopefully going to become an annual thing where we all just jump on and talk about how excited we are about doing Emerald City. Although this year, Emerald City, WonderCon, back-to-back doubleheader for many of us. So that'll be an interesting contrast.
WonderCon's right after it?
Yeah, WonderCon is the weekend after Emerald City.
Oh, man.
That's harsh.
You were lucky enough to not book WonderCon up front a year ago, and some of us said we were no longer going to do back-to-back shows, and then looked at the calendar they had already booked.
Yeah, well, I have one this year. Anime Expo and San Diego are going to be 1 week apart, and they're both 5-day shows. So
wow.
If I see you after San Diego, that will be an amazing feat, because I don't know if I'm going to get out of bed for a year after that.
Yeah.
Ouch. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we're signing off now, and we will see you all next time.